Have you been assigned to assist with congregation accounting? If so, we appreciate your willing spirit and hard work in caring for this very important assignment. We realize that much of your work is cared for away from the Kingdom Hall and is unseen by others in the congregation. The elders, especially the congregation secretary, are responsible to oversee the appropriate use of congregation funds. As an account servant, you have an important role in assisting them. Your assignment as the congregation account servant is not just to keep records like a clerical worker. Rather, your assignment supports the spiritual well-being of the congregation and the advancement of kingdom interests worldwide. Your work is essential and is based on principles that Jehovah uses to guide his servants. The voluntary contributions that you collect in the congregation demonstrate the willing spirit of your brothers and sisters, just like that of God's ancient servants who generously supported pure worship. For example, in Moses' day, after the nation of Israel was released from slavery in Egypt, Exodus chapter 35, verses 20 through 22, relates that all the assembly of the Israelites went out from before Moses, and everyone whose spirit incited him came and brought their contribution for Jehovah to be used. They all presented their offerings of gold to Jehovah. The construction of the tabernacle for worship was going to be financed from those contributions. Notice what happened as a result of their generous spirit. Exodus chapter 36, verses 4 and 5, says that the skilled workers were coming one after another, and they were telling Moses, "The people are bringing much more than what is required for the work that Jehovah has commanded to be done." This statement was made while the project was ongoing. How could they be sure they had enough to finish? Clearly, they must have been keeping track of what was received, how much would be needed, and how much was still on hand. In principle, that's similar to the work you do as an accounts servant. Your efforts help to provide a clear picture of available funds on hand. In that way, the body of elders can be sure that they can meet the financial obligations of your congregation. Rather than donating only out of a sense of duty, our brothers and sisters give from the heart and out of love for Jehovah and their brothers and sisters worldwide. They give prayerful consideration to how they'll use their personal funds and are willing to make sacrifices in order to give voluntary donations. Your accurate record keeping as the congregation account servant helps to make sure that those gifts are handled carefully and used properly. Handling funds for the congregation is a position of trust that must be taken seriously. As noted at 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2, there's an expectation that those who are entrusted with assignments like this will prove to be faithful. By assigning you this responsibility, your body of elders has indicated that they trust you in these matters. Maintaining accurate records and following all published guidelines for your assignment will help you to maintain your integrity and guard the good reputation you have earned. There may be steps in the guidelines that seem unnecessary. We can assure you that the procedures that have been approved are intended to be as simple as possible, while protecting you and the precious donations of our brothers and sisters. Although no one can actually enrich Jehovah, who owns all things, making a financial donation is a privilege that allows Jehovah's people the opportunity to display their love for Him. These contributions advance true worship and bring joy and God's blessing. Similarly, your efforts to account for these contributions can result in Jehovah's blessing as well. So as you care for this important assignment, please be assured of Jehovah's interest and appreciation for all of your efforts. Please take the time to read the instructions for congregation accounting. Take advantage of the new training videos that explain these instructions. While some of the videos describe the work of the elders, most of the information is for you as the account servant. You might even find it helpful to write down some notes and any questions that you have. Ask the congregation secretary to assist you when you need more explanations or direction. Regularly review the instructions and the videos so that you're sure to carefully follow the direction from the organization. Show that you view this assignment as the congregation account servant as an opportunity to do all things for God's glory. And finally, thank you for the time you spend caring for this important work. The governing body appreciates you, dear brothers.
Congregation members willingly contribute their money to Jehovah to advance kingdom interests. You have been assigned to assist in caring for congregation funds. What will help you to faithfully carry out your assignment? What follows is an overview of the basic roles and responsibilities. Other videos in this series will provide further details. Let's talk about the role of the elders. The body of elders is primarily responsible to care for congregation funds. They fulfill this responsibility in three general ways. The first way is considering how funds are used. The body of elders reviews the congregation's ability to support Kingdom Hall operating expenses and branch activities. Then they inform the congregation of the financial needs and follow through on the congregation's decision on the use of congregation funds. The second way is deciding who will be assigned as the account servant, the brothers who are authorized to make payments, and the brothers qualified to collect contributions. The final way is deciding on accounting procedures for local circumstances, such as how often contributions are deposited. In some cases, the elders may discuss and decide that the recommended weekly deposits are not practical, and a less frequent deposit schedule is needed. Now let's consider specifically what the congregation secretary does. The congregation secretary plays an important role in caring for congregation funds. He is primarily responsible to ensure congregation accounting instructions are followed and accounting records are accurate. Therefore, the secretary directly oversees the account servant. He reviews and signs various accounting forms prepared by the account servant. He also reviews bank statements and keeps the body of elders informed of congregation financial matters that need to be cared for. Next, we will discuss the role of the account servant. The account servant plays a key role in caring for congregation funds. He should have a thorough understanding of the accounting instructions. He is responsible to keep accurate and legible accounting records so that the body of elders has a good understanding of the congregation's financial activity. He prepares accounting forms that will be approved and signed by the congregation's secretary and the coordinator of the body of elders. What role does the coordinator of the body of elders play? He has three basic responsibilities: authorizing the payment of normal operating expenses, signing various accounting forms, and arranging for the audit of the accounts. In congregations that use a bank account, the body of elders will authorize 2 to 5 brothers to make payments of congregation expenses. The account servant should not be authorized to make payments. An updated list of the brothers approved to make payments is kept by the account servant in the standing approvals file. These brothers will make payments from the bank account electronically or by signing a check. Finally, the auditor helps to ensure that congregation funds were used correctly and accounting instructions were followed. In conclusion, to successfully fulfill your weighty assignment, faithfully follow the organizational instructions in caring for congregation funds. Understand and respect the roles of your fellow workers. And be assured that the organization, and more importantly Jehovah, appreciates your good work. Congregation funds are routinely used to pay normal congregation operating expenses such as utility bills. At times, though, other needs may arise that are not part of the normal routine. They might include repair or renovation of the Kingdom Hall, or sending a donation to the branch office for a special purpose. Some examples of donations for a special purpose are the Global Assistance Arrangement, Kingdom Hall and Assembly Hall construction, or international conventions. The purpose of this video is to discuss those expenses which are not included in normal operating expenses. Who decides if congregation funds should be used for out-of-the-ordinary expenses? How is the decision documented? First, the body of elders will discuss the matter thoroughly, so they have a full understanding of the need to use congregation funds in this way. For resolutions that are not routine, an elders meeting may be appropriate. When they have come to an agreement, one of the elders will prepare a written resolution to be presented to the congregation. A resolution is a document that is part of a theocratic process showing what the funds are being used for, the total amount to be used, and that it has been approved by the congregation. Here is how it is used. During the midweek meeting, the elder serving as chairman will briefly and clearly explain the need to use congregation funds to care for the out-of-the-ordinary expense. He will also let the congregation know that the body of elders recommends using congregation funds in this way. The elder will allow congregation members to ask questions if anything is not clear to them. Once any questions have been answered, the resolution will be read to the congregation. The chairman will ask baptized members for a show of hands, first for those who are in favor, and then for any who may not favor the resolution. If the majority of baptized members present at the meeting are in agreement, then the resolution is considered approved. Later, the resolution will be updated to include the date that the congregation approved it. Finally, the coordinator of the body of elders and the secretary will sign the resolution. The completed and signed resolution is then kept in the congregation accounts file. If the expense or donation is a one-time occurrence, place it in the current file. If the expense or donation reoccurs on a regular basis each month, file it in the standing approvals file. In summary, a written resolution is used to record decisions by the congregation to use funds outside ordinary operating expenses. It is first discussed by the body of elders. A resolution is presented to the congregation at the midweek meeting. It should be approved by the majority of the baptized members of the congregation who are present at the meeting. It is then dated and signed by the coordinator of the body of elders and the congregation secretary, and filed in the congregation accounts files. The body of elders has assigned you to collect funds from the contribution boxes. How are funds collected? Arrive early so that you can make sure the contribution boxes are closed. After the meeting, when the majority of the attendees have left, begin collecting the contributions. When removing funds from the contribution boxes, 2 brothers should always be present. Make sure to keep the funds for local congregation expenses separate from the funds designated for the worldwide work until they are recorded. Prepare 2 transaction record forms. Put the date on both forms and check the contribution box. Both brothers count the money. If checks are collected, verify that the check is correctly written out to the congregation or as directed by the branch office. Record the amount for the worldwide work on the worldwide work line. Record the amount for local congregation expenses on the local congregation expenses line. Add up the total of all funds. Both brothers print and sign their names. Give the contributions and 1 transaction record form to the account servant. He will deposit the money into the primary account. The brother who verified the amount gives the 2nd transaction record form to the congregation secretary. In summary, even though collecting funds is a routine task, it is a weighty responsibility. Contributed funds belong to Jehovah. 2 brothers should always be present when the funds are collected. 2 transaction record forms should always be filled out. Following these steps closely will give evidence of your trustworthiness as a steward of Jehovah's funds. We want to support our brothers and sisters as they make voluntary offerings to Jehovah. It is possible to make donations electronically or by putting funds in our contribution boxes locally. All congregations should have suitable contribution boxes. How many contribution boxes are needed? And how are they used? There should be at least 2 contribution boxes, one for donations for the worldwide work and another for local congregation expenses. If needed, more than one may be used for each type of contribution. Use the contribution box labels provided by the branch office. Funds collected in the box designated for the worldwide work are used to support the global preaching, teaching, and publishing activities of Jehovah's Witnesses. They also fund disaster relief. These funds are to be sent each month to the branch office and are not to be used to pay for any local expenses. Funds collected in the box designated for local congregation expenses are used to pay for local expenses, such as utility bills. At times, the branch office may instruct the congregation to temporarily set up a contribution box for special purposes. Follow their instructions, paying close attention to the directions for labeling the contribution boxes and the amount of time the contribution box is to be made available. In summary, each Kingdom Hall will have contribution boxes available for all to give to Jehovah as they choose. Follow the branch's instructions closely on labeling the boxes and sending funds designated for the worldwide work each month. So as to have funds available for congregation expenses, the congregation should maintain a specific amount of funds in the primary account. How is this amount calculated? How should funds that are collected for special purchases be handled? What should be done if the balance of the funds exceeds what is calculated? Let's start with the first question. How do you calculate the amount of funds to maintain in the congregation's bank account? First, add up the total congregation expenditures on the monthly congregation accounts report for the last 12 months. Then, divide this by 12. And your new total will be the average monthly expenses for your congregation. Next, for the body of elders to choose the amount of funds to maintain in the account, you will need to calculate the lowest and highest amount of funds. If your congregation shares the Kingdom Hall with one or more congregations, multiply the average monthly expenses by 2 to get the lowest amount, and multiply by 3 to get the highest amount. If your congregation does not share the Kingdom Hall, multiply the average monthly expenses by 4 to get the lowest amount, and by 6 to get the highest amount. The body of elders will choose an amount between the lowest and highest calculations. This amount should be documented and kept in the congregation's standing approvals file. What if funds are collected for a special purchase or payment? Sometimes the congregation may pass a resolution to pay for a future expense, but there are not enough funds in the primary account. Therefore, funds may be collected in advance over a period of several months. In this situation, as funds are collected for the special payment, the funds in the primary account will exceed the amount approved by the body of elders. The amount being collected for the special payment should be shown in the monthly congregation accounts report under the section Congregation Funds Reserved for Special Purposes. Some months the publishers will contribute more funds than needed for congregation expenses. This becomes evident on the monthly congregation accounts report when the amount in the primary account is more than the amount the body of elders decided upon. How should this be handled? The body of elders, after considering the matter, may decide to inform the congregation and recommend that the extra funds be donated toward Kingdom Hall and Assembly Hall construction worldwide. In this case, a one-time resolution would be presented. The specific wording of the resolution is found in the Instructions for Congregation Accounting. In summary, it is important that a body of elders approves the target balance, monitors this balance using the accounts report, and makes adjustments as needed. The accounts servant and congregation secretary can assist with keeping the body of elders informed if the amount of funds is less than or more than what they have approved. The S26 accounts sheet is the main form we use to document each financial transaction that occurs during a month. As the account servant, how can you make sure to record transactions accurately so that the congregation secretary and auditor can review them? This video will focus on how to record bank transactions in the primary account column on the S26. First, let's consider deposits to the primary account. In the date column, note the day of the month that the deposit was made into the primary account. In the transaction description column, record that the transaction is a deposit. The next column is the transaction code. For deposits, use the letter D. In the receipts out column, record the deposited amount of the received contributions that have not already been deposited. Finally, in the primary account in column, record the amount of the deposit to the bank account. Now let's talk about payments that are made from the primary account. For payments, there should always be some type of document, for example an invoice, which shows the date and amount, who was paid, and the initials of the elder who authorized the expense. First, in the date column, note the day of the month that the payment was made. In the transaction description column, describe the nature of the payment and include any confirmation or reference numbers, such as the check number, if a check was written. In the transaction code column, write E for expenses. Finally, in the primary account out column, record the amount of the payment. There are other banking transactions that you need to record. Let's see what they are. If interest was earned, record the date the interest was earned. Describe the transaction as interest on primary account. Use the letter I in the transaction code column. And record the amount of the interest earned in the primary account in column. If contributions were received electronically from publishers, record the date the funds were received into the bank account. Describe the transaction as contributions, congregation electronic. Use the letters CE in the transaction code column and record the amount of the contribution in the primary account in column. If a publisher uses a check for a congregation contribution and the contribution check is returned unpaid from the bank, record the date the check was returned. Describe the transaction as contributions, congregation, check returned. Use the letter C in the transaction code column and record the negative amount of the check in the primary account in column. For electronic transfers or withdrawals and bank fees, record the date of the transaction. Describe the nature of the transaction and include the confirmation or reference number of the transfer in the transaction description column. Use the letter E in the transaction code column and record the amount in the primary account out column. For congregation checks that were voided or returned unpaid by the bank, and electronic funds transfers or withdrawals that were rejected, record the date of the transaction, describe the nature of the transaction, use the letter E in the transaction code column, and record the negative amount in the primary account out column. Now lastly, let's consider how to record cash payments. If a cash payment is needed, it will be made with cash from contribution boxes after the cash has been counted and recorded on the S24, but before it has been deposited to the primary account. The account servant should have one of two types of documents. 1. An invoice or purchase receipt with who will be paid, the date, and the initials of the account servant. Also, the document will show the date and the initials of the recipient of the cash. Or 2. The transaction record with the payment box checked. It will have the date, who will be paid, the initials and signature of who approved the payment, the initials and signature of the account servant, the signature of the payment recipient, and the date the payment was received. On the account sheet, record the full amount of the funds from the contribution boxes in the Receipts In column. When a cash payment is made, record it in the Receipts Out column. Finally, record the remaining cash amount in the Primary Account In column after you made the deposit. In summary, carefully recording the primary account transactions on the account sheet will set the foundation for accurate and reliable monthly reports to the body of elders and the congregation. The transaction record or S24 form is an important document. We use it to record collected contributions, payments made without an invoice, deposits to a cash box, and cash advances. Of course, some uses will depend on whether your congregation uses a bank account or a cash account as its primary account. As the account servant, how can you record these transactions on the account sheet? It is important to record the information accurately, so that the congregation secretary and auditor can review them. This video will show you how to do that for each transaction type, with the exception of cash advances, which will be covered in another video. Let's start by filling out the top section of the accounts sheet. Our first transaction type is contribution. Fill out the date column. The transaction record states what day of the month donated funds were collected from the contribution boxes. Enter the day here. In the transaction description column, record that the transaction is a contribution and describe the purpose of the contribution. In this case, we'll write contributions WW for worldwide work. The next column is the transaction code, abbreviated TC. The transaction code helps to categorize and summarize the transactions at the end of the month. For contributions, record the purpose of the contribution. W, as in this case, for contributions to the worldwide work, and C for contributions to the congregation. For a complete list of all transaction codes, please see the S27, Instructions for Congregation Accounting form. Finally, in the Receipts In column, record the amount of the contribution. Repeat these steps for the next transaction. Record the date, purpose of the contribution, transaction code, and amount. Now let's look at the next type, payment. Again, begin by filling out the date column. The transaction record states what day of the month the payment was made. Enter the day here. In the transaction description column, write the purpose of the payment as noted on the transaction record. For the transaction code column, use E, which stands for congregation expenses. What column should you use to record the payment amount? If the payment was made with cash from the contribution box, after the cash has been counted and recorded on the S24, but before it has been deposited to the primary account, record the payment amount in the Receipts Out column. If the payment was made with a check, record the payment amount in the Primary Account Out column. In this case, the payment was made with a check, so we'll enter the amount here. Let's continue with the next type, Cash Box Deposit. Again, begin by filling out the date column. The transaction record states what day of the month the deposit was made. Enter the day here. In the transaction description column, write Deposit to Cash Box. For the transaction code column, use D, which stands for deposit. You need to record the deposit amount in two columns. First, in the Receipts Out column, then in the Primary Account In column. In summary, why is it important that you carefully enter the transaction records in the accounts sheet? Doing so will set the foundation for accurate and reliable monthly reports to the body of elders and the congregation. As the account servant, you assist with the maintenance of the bank account. The congregation should have only one primary method to handle congregation accounts. This video shows how to correctly set up and maintain a bank account. A separate video will discuss having a cash account. When setting up a bank account, it should be opened using a name that is similar to the address line on correspondence received from the branch office. If a bank account cannot legally be opened in the name of the congregation, follow the direction provided by your branch office. This may be to open an account in the name of 2 or 3 brothers. The body of elders will choose them. It is preferred that these brothers be elders or ministerial servants. Those chosen must sign an agreement that the balance of the bank account is the property of the congregation. Copies of any documents required for the purpose of establishing a congregation bank account should be retained in the archive file. Regardless of how the account is opened, the rest of the setup of the account is the same. Next is the appointment of brothers who are approved to make payments from the account. The body of elders will choose 2 to 5 brothers who will share this responsibility. The account servant should not be authorized to make payments from the primary account. The approved brothers can be given access to the banking tool and make payments from the primary account electronically, if available, or by check. A list of the approved brothers should be signed by the service committee and kept in the standing approvals file. When electronic banking features allow for alert notifications to be sent, the secretary should select the options to receive alerts when electronic payments are made, changes are made to the alert notifications, and when any changes are made to the account. Although not authorized to make payments, the account servant should be able to monitor the account activity by means of the banking tool. Any bank card issued for the account should not be used to make withdrawals, transfers, electronic payments, or purchases. If possible, the bank card should be set up as a deposit-only card. How should bank statements be managed? The bank statements should be given unopened to the secretary. If bank statements are obtained electronically, the secretary should download and print them. The secretary should review the statement for any irregularities and initial the statement before giving it to the account servant for reconciliation. If the bank offers to return processed physical checks, the secretary can decide whether they need to have the physical checks returned or simply images of the paid checks. In summary, when setting up a bank account, remember to set up the account in the name of the congregation the branch office uses, or in the name of 2 to 3 brothers who have signed an agreement. A copy of this agreement should be kept in the archive file. The body of elders will discuss and select the brothers approved to pay expenses directly from this account, and the secretary is to receive and review all bank statements. So as to have funds available for congregation expenses, the congregation should maintain a specific amount of funds in the primary account, which is the cash box. This amount is called the target balance. How is this amount calculated? What about funds that are collected for special purchases? What should be done if the balance of funds exceeds the target balance? Let's answer the first question. How do you calculate the amount of funds to be maintained in the primary account? First, add up the total congregation expenses on the monthly congregation accounts report for the past 12 months. Then, divide this by 12, and your new total will be the average monthly expenses for your congregation. Next, for the body of elders to choose the amount of funds to maintain in the account, you will need to calculate the lowest and highest amounts of funds. If your congregation shares the Kingdom Hall with 1 or more congregations, multiply the average monthly expenses by 1 to get the lowest amount, and multiply by 2 to get the highest amount. If your congregation does not share the Kingdom Hall, multiply the average monthly expenses by 2 to get the lowest amount, and by 4 to get the highest amount. The body of elders will choose an amount between the lowest and highest calculations. The amount chosen by the body of elders should be documented and kept in the congregation's standing approvals file. What if funds are collected for a special payment? Sometimes the congregation may pass a resolution to pay for a future expense, but there are not enough funds in the primary account. Therefore, funds may be collected in advance over a period of several months. In this situation, as funds are collected for the special payment, the funds in the primary account will exceed the amount approved by the body of elders. The amount being collected for the special payment should be shown on the monthly congregation accounts report under the section Congregation Funds Reserved for Special Purposes. Sometimes the funds available to the congregation may exceed the target balance. How should these extra funds be handled if this happens for a few months? The body of elders, after considering the matter, may decide to inform the congregation and recommend that the extra funds be donated towards Kingdom Hall and Assembly Hall construction worldwide. A one-time resolution could be presented to the congregation, or, if the congregation regularly has excess or insufficient funds, this may indicate that the amount of the resolved monthly donation to Kingdom Hall and Assembly Hall construction worldwide could be adjusted at the time of the next review. In summary, it is important that the body of elders approves the target balance, monitors this balance using the accounts report, and makes adjustments as needed. The account servant and congregation secretary can assist with keeping the body of elders informed if the amount of funds is less than or more than what they have approved. The congregation should have only one primary method to handle congregation accounts. This video shows how to correctly set up and maintain a cash account, also called a cash box. The body of elders is responsible for establishing and maintaining a secure cash box arrangement. The cash box should be a box that can be securely locked. It should be kept in a safe and secure place. The body of elders will appoint a trustworthy publisher to care for the cash box. This person will be known as the cash box holder. It is preferred that the person chosen is an elder or ministerial servant. The person cannot be the account servant or a relative of the account servant. The cash box holder will need to sign an agreement. Please watch the video Setting Up a Cash Agreement to see what should be included in the agreement. When the cash box is first set up, the account servant and the cash box holder should count the cash and ensure that the opening balance agrees with the accounts sheet or S26. All deposits and payments from the cash box must be documented using a transaction record or S24 with the appropriate box checked. The accounts sheet or S26 is the main ledger used to record transactions affecting the primary account. If transactions are up to date, the primary account ending balance figure in the account sheet summary box on page 2 may be used to determine the current balance of the cash box. However, if an electronic version of the account sheet is not being used, the account servant may choose to duplicate the transaction entries in a separate bank book in order to maintain a running balance of the primary account. The cash box holder should keep a simple separate ledger to record cash box deposits and payments and a running balance for himself. Regularly during the month, he should count the cash to ensure that it is correct, comparing the balance to the simple ledger. A backup to the cash box holder is chosen by the body of elders. It is preferred that the person chosen is an elder or ministerial servant. The person cannot be the account servant or a relative of the account servant, and they must also sign an agreement. If the cash box is transferred to the backup, the following steps are performed. The cash box holder and backup will count the cash. A transaction record form and a copy are filled out and signed to document the transfer. The cash box holder and backup each keep a copy of the transaction record. If the transfer is permanent, then the agreement in the archive file is updated. In summary, when setting up a cash box account, keep a securely locked cash box in a safe location. Select trustworthy persons to be the cash box holder and backup. A copy of the agreement should be kept in the archive file. And count the cash regularly to ensure it matches the running total on the ledger. Keeping the money that the congregation has dedicated to Jehovah safe and secure is a weighty responsibility. The elders have assigned you as the cash box holder, or a backup cash box holder, which indicates that they have found you to be trustworthy. While this video refers to the cash box holder, it also applies to the backup cash box holder. Why is signing an agreement necessary? In Bible times, it was a common practice for faithful servants of Jehovah to document agreements that involved money. Even when the participants of the agreement were relatives, the agreement was documented. Having an agreement in writing helps to clearly outline the responsibilities of those involved and prevents misunderstandings. What should be in the agreement between the cash box holder and the congregation? Here are 4 key points to include. First, the cash box holder agrees that he is responsible to safeguard the cash. Second, the cash box holder will not use the money, even temporarily, to care for a personal need. Third, the cash will only be used on approved congregation purchases. Fourth, the full amount of cash will be returned if requested by the body of elders. The original copy of the signed agreement is placed in the archive file. You as the cash box holder also receive a copy of the agreement. In summary, being chosen as the cash box holder indicates the high level of trust the elders have for you. To protect yourself and the congregation, make sure the Bible practice of having a written agreement is followed. By following the instructions in the agreement, Jehovah will continue to bless your hard work. In this video, we will discuss the 4 ways to make payments from the primary account. They are initiating electronic payments, electronic funds withdrawal, which allows suppliers to automatically withdraw funds from the bank account electronically, using a check, and making cash payments. Lastly, we will also discuss what you should do when you do not have enough funds to make a payment. First, let's discuss how to make an electronic payment from the primary account. Begin by verifying that the expense has been approved for payment and that enough funds are available in the primary account. Then you should indicate the payment amount and the payee information on the documents supporting the expense and forward them to one of the brothers approved to make the electronic payment. The brother making the payment should not be the same brother who approved the expense. The brother making the electronic payment should review the documents supporting the expense for approval and accuracy, process the payment, and then initial and write the date and any reference number of the electronic payment on the documentation. He will print the receipt produced by the internet banking site or e-payment tool, indicating the amount and the payee, and return this receipt and all other documentation to you as the account servant. Then, if you have online access to the bank account, it is preferred you review the payment online. If you do not have access, you can review that the amount and the payee are correct on the payment receipt or other documentation that you receive. Then, record the payment on the account sheet or S26. Next, how do you set up an electronic funds withdrawal? If approved, some suppliers can withdraw the amount owed to them directly from the congregation's primary account each month. When this is available, both the secretary and another brother approved to make payments from the primary account should sign the authorization agreement supplied by the company. A copy of this agreement is given to you as the account servant to file in the Standing Approvals file. When the monthly invoice from the supplier is received, verify that it shows the amount that will be withdrawn. Then have the coordinator of the body of elders approve and initial the invoice just like other invoices and purchase receipts. Record the payment on the account sheet and place the invoice in the current file for the month during which the withdrawal occurs. Another way to make payments from the primary account is by using checks, which are provided by the bank. First, verify that an expense has been approved for payment and that enough funds are available in the primary account. Next, provide a check with the payment details written on it and the supporting documentation to one of the approved check signers. The check signer must not be the same brother who approved the expense. The check signer should review the documents for approval and accuracy, sign the check, and then return these to you. Checks should not be signed unless they have been filled out completely. Then forward the check to the payee and record the payment on the account sheet. Lastly, how do you make cash payments? When cash is needed to pay for a small congregation expense, a brother should pay for these approved expenses using his personal cash and then be reimbursed by the congregation by means of a check or an electronic payment. However, if this is not practical, cash collected from contribution boxes may be used to reimburse the brother using the following procedure. Before using the cash, verify that the full amounts collected from the contribution boxes have already been documented on a transaction record form, or S24. Note that cash from contributions may not be provided in advance to those making a purchase. The cash box deposit and cash advance checkboxes on the transaction record form should never be used by congregations using a bank account as the primary account. Next, verify that the invoice or purchase receipt for the expense has been approved and that enough cash has been collected to cover the expense. Then initial and write the date, the payee, and the amount on the document. Next, exchange cash collected from the contribution boxes for the invoice or purchase receipt. The recipient of the cash must sign and date the invoice or purchase receipt, confirming that he has received and counted the cash. Note that if there is no invoice or purchase receipt, such as when reimbursing a visiting public speaker for his travel expenses, a transaction record form with the payment box checked should be used to document the approval of the expense and the payment details. Finally, record the cash payment amount as a separate transaction in the Receipts Out column. When the remaining amount is deposited, record this as a separate transaction in the Receipts Out and Primary Account In columns. What should you do if there are not enough funds to make a payment? When there are not enough funds in the primary account to pay outstanding bills, immediately notify the secretary. The secretary will obtain direction from the body of elders. If outstanding bills cannot be paid within 1 month, contact the service department. In summary, regardless of how the payment is being made, make sure it has been approved, has the necessary documentation, and this documentation is kept in the appropriate files.
How to add a user to a congregation domain. Every LDC volunteer needs a Builder Assistant account. To register as an LDC volunteer, a publisher completes and submits a DC-50 form to the Congregation Service Committee. The Congregation Service Committee approves the application and sends it to the LDC through the jw.org inbox. A copy must be retained in the congregation file. When the LDC receives the approved DC-50, they send an email to the publisher with a volunteer number and instructions for accessing Builder Assistant. The publisher must have a jw.org account and be added to his congregation domain to complete his initial Builder Assistant login. If he does not have a jw.org account, he must create one using the login link from the jw.org homepage and click Create New Account. A publisher that is added to the congregation domain solely for Builder Assistant access does not need any additional roles in the domain. Adding him to the domain will not grant access to confidential information such as elder letters, emails to elders, or other administration features. While a publisher may see an inbox tab on jw.org or appear in the list when using the Find Recipients link in the congregation inbox, he will not have an email account. Note: changes in a publisher's status must be communicated to the LDC through the congregation jw.org inbox. Removing a publisher from the congregation domain does not prevent him from accessing Builder Assistant. Here are the steps for the congregation domain administrator to add a publisher to the congregation domain. Ask the publisher to log into his jw.org account and provide his 6 to 8-digit alphanumeric unique user code at the bottom of the site page. Log in to jw.org. Click the Administration tab. Click Add User. Type the unique user code provided by the publisher. Click Find User. The publisher's name appears. No jw.org roles need to be assigned to the publisher to access Builder Assistant. Click Next. Review the information. Click Previous to make any corrections, or click Submit. A confirmation message appears. Communicate directly with the publisher to log in to his jw.org account and accept the domain assignment. Note that the publisher does not receive an email notification. The congregation domain administrator work is complete. The publisher will then complete the following steps. Log in to jw.org and accept the new domain assignment. After clicking Accept, check that the congregation name appears below the publisher's name. This confirms the publisher is added to the congregation domain. Following the LDC email instructions to access Builder Assistant, the publisher is presented with a video how to link accounts. To link accounts, he will use his organizational jw.org account, username, and password. The format of the username is username@field.jw.org. Finally, he will type his Builder Assistant volunteer number and click Request Single-Use Password. When the email with the password is received, the publisher can complete the steps to link his account. Note: this is not the same as the congregation domain administrator linking users to branch person records in the Link Users section of jw.org. If a publisher is in the congregation domain and cannot link his jw.org and Builder Assistant accounts, he should contact the LDC Help Desk for further assistance by clicking the link on the screen.
It's been 5 years since a local design construction department, or LDC, was set up in every branch. So what's been accomplished and how? What can you do to support this arrangement? One of the objectives of the program is to evaluate how Kingdom Halls are used and maintained to improve long-term planning. To accomplish this, a master planning process was developed and put in place. This process helps the governing body get a global picture of all the theocratic facilities being used. To do this, property evaluations were made of most of our buildings. These evaluations tell us how each hall is being used, its current condition, and how it might be used in the future. This information helps us to optimize the use of dedicated resources. Additionally, Tens of thousands of publishers have been trained to properly maintain their own kingdom halls. Literally hundreds of maintenance jobs and minor renovations are being completed each month, proving that we're living up to the words found at Nehemiah 10:39. We will not neglect the house of our God. Listen to the following, brothers and sisters, as they share how they feel about volunteering for this work.
Coming from the construction background, I thought that building kingdom halls was the greatest thing that we could do. But what I've learned in my maintenance assignment is even more so how important it is to maintain the buildings that we already have. It saves dedicated funds in a way that I never thought about at all before.
When I was a young girl, while at a Kingdom Hall construction project with my parents, I learned that there was a great need for electricians to support the LDC. At the age of 11, I set the goal of learning to be an electrician once I completed school. Upon graduating from high school, I went to a trade school for 2 years where I learned to be an electrician. When I finished, I was immediately invited to join LDC. I have enjoyed many blessings since I joined LDC. Besides my skill as an electrician, I have learned many other skills such as building and painting.
The sheer number of publishers worldwide is rapidly growing, and thousands of our existing kingdom halls need renovation. The projected need right now calls for more than 10,000 Kingdom Hall projects worldwide. In fact, during just the last 12 months alone, over 800 new Kingdom Halls and 870 major renovations were completed. High in the mountains, deep in rainforests, in large cities, war-torn areas, and many other challenging locations. There is a great need for willing and well-trained volunteers. After all, this construction, maintenance, and renovation work will carry on right into the new world. We can be sure that our efforts to support this building program in any way that we can are greatly appreciated by Jehovah.
I help the construction department from home. I started working with the branch even though I'm 700 miles away from Bethel. In fact, being busy in Jehovah's service is a protection from distractions that could affect my spirituality. I have received many, many blessings by working as a volunteer.
We live in momentous times, brothers and sisters, when God's people are showing amazing zeal for true worship. So there's plenty to do. And we invite those of you with experience in real estate, design, and construction to volunteer for the LDC program. If you're not in a position to apply right now, you can still support the work through your loving donations and prayers on behalf of the volunteers and projects worldwide. One thing is clear. There's definitely a need for more skilled and trained volunteers in every branch. So even if you haven't yet been invited, don't give up. Keep making yourself available. Your zealous efforts to support this arrangement are yet another way you can join in the joyful shout of praise that is going up to Jehovah now and for all eternity.